tutor here at examPAL, and today we're going to talk about how to build a study guide. And before I get started, I just want to make sure you guys can hear me so that I'm not talking to myself for the next hour. So if any of you could just in the chat, thank you Gauhar89, thank you Contact to Malay. Great. So if at any point I cut off or something like that, if you could let me know. Hi Nagarwal, and thank you Priyam. And also you're welcome to use the chat, which you've now discovered, to ask questions throughout. So as I said, we're going to discuss over the next hour how to build a study plan. It's going to help you, reach your highest score faster. And this webinar, is the first day of our bootcamp. The bootcamp is aimed to provide you guys with study tips and strategies that will help you ace the test. Now, tomorrow, you're going to learn how to solve fractions and percents questions and see how relevant this material is to real life. And during this whole week, today and the whole week, you're welcome to enjoy a 25% discount on all the examPAL courses, our Genius course, our Premium course, our Quant course, all of them. And to do that, enter the Bootcamp agenda page on our website, and you will be able to take us up on that offer. So we're going to start talking about the study guide. But before we do, I want to tell you a little bit about who we are at examPAL and what we can do for you. So the reason we started examPAL as a group of GMAT teachers and tutors is because we realized from working in the industry that students all around the globe are paying too much, and they're doing it for the wrong product. And what's worse, they only realize they're doing so after they complete their preparation, when it's too late. And why is that? So test takers spend a lot of time and money preparing for admissions tests, only to realize that the regular physical brick and mortar courses they're taking are, first of all, frustrating. The reason being that for many questions on the GMAT, there can be lots and lots of different ways to solve the question, whereas regular physical courses just teach a one-size-fits-all way. They tell you this is the way to solve it, do this, and what's right for one person might not be the right way to solve the question for you, which can be frustrating because you can be learning something which is actually not the most effective way for you to solve. Another problem is that such courses are often not effective, okay? These tests, as we're going to discuss a lot today, are not testing your knowledge. They're not really testing your skill. One of the main things they're testing is your speed. That's one of really our main constraints. And again, if we're just learning in front of a teacher telling you how to solve the material, it's not necessarily going to help you prepare for the most effective way to save time. And speaking of time, these courses can be quite time consuming because since they're one size fits all, they feed you thousands of questions, many of which are going to be too easy for you and thus boring and not helpful, and some of which are going to be too hard and thus also not helpful because they can just frustrate you. What you want to do is really be spending your time studying questions that are at your level or a little bit above your level in order to improve. And that's one of the things that we've realized here at examPAL. We've realized that admissions tests are about a skill that we call cognitive flexibility, which is your ability to change the set of tools that you're using when solving the test very quickly in reaction to changes in the data that you're getting. And the test, it really throws a lot of curveballs at you quite quickly. 1 second, you're solving an algebra question. The next minute, you're solving a geometry data sufficiency question. And then there's a word problem where you have to you're not even sure what the question is because you have to turn a lot of words into data, into equations. So what we do in examPAL is not just provide you with the knowledge you need for tests, but we train you to find the fastest way possible to solve each question. Now, how do we do that? So there's a few things that we do differently. Most courses teach you the way to solve each question, but the first thing we realize is that there's really no such thing as the way or the explanation. I've taught lots of students over the years. And personally, when a new teacher comes to me and says, the student is asking me about this question, how do I explain it? My answer is to whom? Who is the student? And what is he like? And that'll inform my answer of how to solve it. So on examPAL, we study the way our students think. We ask you after questions which tools you used, which tools you didn't use, and then we try to offer you solutions that cater to your personal strengths. We study the effectiveness of all possible methods from our thousands and thousands of students from all around the world. So we actually have data on what is the most efficient way to solve each question. And we incorporate these two bits of information, our information on you specifically and our information on the question in general, in order to find the best way for you to solve each question. And this is something that not even a private tutor can really do. We're with you in each and every question, from the basics to the hardest ones, and when we offer you a solution strategy, we're not guessing, we're measuring. So how do we do that? Well, our process starts with interactive video lessons. Okay, and while you study our course, the course studies you. Each topic starts with a short video teaser, usually a funny one that's going to make you wait for the next lesson. And then we have an introduction video that talks about the basic concepts of each topic, be it triangles or critical reasoning or whatever. And from there on, we move to a lesson video, a second video in which we demonstrate how different questions from the test can be solved using different approaches. And from there, we go to practice. Each practice session starts with a diagnostic phase. As I mentioned, we found that there's lots of different ways to solve a question. And these different ways, lots and lots of different tools, but they can be divided into three overall strategies: precise, alternative, and logical. PAL, PAL. And this is the PAL in examPAL, our name. For example, the question that's on the screen right now can be solved. How would you go ahead and solve it? Take a second to look at it. So we don't have enough time to really solve it all together, but I'm just going to throw at you a few different ways. It can be solved logically. Okay. How do we do that? Well, or first of all, let's start with precise. It can be start with a precise way by just simplifying the algebraic expression, as we do here. It can be solved with the alternative method by plugging in numbers, simple ones such as x and y equal 1, and then solving for those numbers. Or it can be solved logically by figuring out that what the ratio between the numerator and denominator is. So these are all three different ways that can get us to the same solution. And in the diagnostic phase, what we do is you learn what your level is in implementing each of these tools. Then comes the improvement phase, in which we focus on your level and we find the best questions for you to solve in order to improve your skills. By this, I don't mean just being adaptive in the same sense that the GMAT is adaptive, by just giving you simpler or harder questions according to how you're doing, but being adaptive at the level of what tools you're using. We find out what tools work best for you and what were the reasons for your mistakes. And then the final part of our practice is called the optimization phase, in which we focus on your level and find the best questions for you in order to improve your skills. So, for example, say here you see a question in which our system found 4 possible solution strategies, and it ranks them in order of the relevance to you. All right, so in professional terms, what we do in examPAL is called an open, semi-supervised recommendation system, which in normal human terms means we're moving from machine learning to actually machine teaching. We scan through the ideas of our students in order to find the ones that are easiest for you to understand and implement. We've won lots of awards, and our customers are very happy. And in fact, we're so confident that we're the only GMAT course that we're aware of, at least, that really puts our money where our mouth is. We give you a real success guarantee, 70 points in the GMAT if you have a prior GMAT score. So take us up on that. So, as I already mentioned, that we are now in our Bootcamp special offer. So that's who we are. We have 25% off on all of our GMAT courses. And now, without further ado, let's start talking about the real reason you guys are here today, which is our study plan. Okay, so the question we're talking about is, what should your study plan look like? And the first question you might want to answer here, or you might be asking here, that is how long should your plan be? And you really can divide this question into two more specific questions. The first one is, how much should you study in total, right? How much time do you need, like the amount of absolute hours? And the second one is how long a period you should spread your study over. When should you start studying on the calendar according to in relation to when your actual GMAT test is. So we're going to talk about both of these questions. We're going to answer the first one right now rather shortly, and then the second one is actually we're going to talk about in more length. So how much time do you need? Well, our answer is 100 to 120 hours. Okay? This is what we have found to be a sufficient amount of time for studying for the GMAT from scratch. As you'll see when we start talking about lengths of time, whether 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, this is not that much, 100 to 120 hours. Even if you have a full-time job, you are able to do it. You should be able to do it, that is. But the caveat being that you need to spend these 100 to 120 hours effectively. There are a lot of study plans out there that are a lot longer, and they're not necessarily more effective at all because they consist of doing the same thing over and over. So that's really what we're going to be talking about now, how to make these 100 to 120 hours effective. I will say, though, before, yes, from zero background. We do mean from zero background. Except if you're a non-native English speaker and your English level is something you need to work on, you should add another 30 hours to that. Another 30 hours for reading and for working on your English skills. So that makes that 130 to 150 hours. Still not all that much, right? And now to talk about our second question of how long this should be spread out over. I'm just going to say right now, our recommended amount of time that we, all things being equal, we recommend doing this over 6 to 8 weeks. So a month to a month and a half. And that works out to around 15 hours per week. And I'm going to talk a lot now about why this is our recommended amount of time. And if you want to do it quicker or slower, that's also possible. And we're going to talk about all of that. But just right off the bat, this is our recommended. And if you do that, it works out to 15 hours a week, which, do the math, it's about 2 hours a day on average. Again, it should be possible, even for people that are otherwise rather busy. Okay, so now let's talk about the second more complicated question, which I just kind of started talking about now, which is how long an amount of time should you spend on the GMAT? And even though I've given you already our recommended answer, the real answer is it's a little bit more complicated than that, and it depends. What does it depend on? Well, the main thing it depends on is how long do you have, right? By this I mean two things, actually. Two ways of how long do you have. When do you need to take the GMAT, which has a lot to do, obviously, with what you want to apply for. Oftentimes it makes sense to give yourself a time maybe to do another GMAT if you have before your application deadline. So that's the first question. How far is that off from now? And the second question is, how much time do you have, like, in the week? How much time can you devote to studying per day, per week, per month? And this obviously depends on your life, on your schedule outside the GMAT. So how devoted are you? How devoted can you realistically be? And I'm going to stress the word realistically. I'm going to talk about that a lot today because it's important not to be too overly optimistic and say, oh, I'm going to study 15 hours per day for the GMAT while keeping my job and also maintaining my active social life, right? That's not going to happen. We need to be realistic. So, okay, so as I mentioned, 6 to 8 weeks, so a little bit below 2 months, up to 2 months is a recommended amount of time, and this is why. On the one hand, it's not too short, okay? It gives you enough time to study everything and also be able to breathe a little bit. so you won't get overly stressed, as you may be if you're going to try and prepare in a shorter amount of time. On the other hand, it's not too long. You're not going to have enough time to start forgetting the material that you learned at the beginning of your studies, or become exhausted from months of putting your life on hold and just preparing for the test. So let me put it this way. If fitting 100 to 120 hours of studying into 2 months, which as I mentioned works out to be around 15 hours per week, if that's realistic for you, and as I said, it should be realistic even for working people, provided that they can devote their evenings and weekends to study, then this is what we recommend. And I'm going to talk in a minute about what this means, but that's kind of the headline. The 2-month plan is what we recommend. Abhinav asks, can we get the recording of this webinar? Yes, you can. We will send you the recording of this webinar, so don't worry about it if I'm talking too fast, and if you missed something, you'll be able to go back and review it. So just to give you an example of someone who the 2-month plan might work for, let's talk about someone called John Doe. John Doe has the following characteristics. It's the first time that he's taking the GMAT, and he's starting from scratch, so he doesn't really know really what he's doing yet, and he has to study everything. He is a native English speaker, okay, meaning that on the one hand, he doesn't have to read lots and lots of material to work on his skills, but on the other hand, he probably should do some reading because a lot of people who are natural-born English speakers tend to overlook this and be kind of overconfident in their skills, which tends to be dangerous. He has a full-time job, right? But on the other hand, he can devote a lot of his spare time to study. So he can let's say he can comfortably schedule about an hour and a half of study in the evening and 4 hours on the weekend. Okay? And now let's say that John knows that he's naturally good at quantitative topics, and he's more concerned about the verbal, but really this plan is flexible enough to suit someone who's also needs to work on all of his skills from the start, and also someone who has a few constraints. Say, for example, John can only take work. On the one hand, he can take work off the week before the exam, but let's say on the other hand, 3 weeks before he has a business trip where he won't be able to study at all, and also he's planning a vacation for his birthday on one of the weekends. The details don't matter that much because obviously this is a theoretical person, but the point is that if you are anything like John, right, if you have a full-time job, you can devote a lot of your time to studying, but at the same time you do have some constraints, then this probably is the plan that we recommend for you. All right. And I'll say right now, building a longer or shorter study plan is definitely possible, and we're going to talk about that after we talk about the 2-month study plan. So if this is not you, if you're saying to yourself, I don't have this amount of time, or I have more time than this, so we're going to get to you soon. But now let's talk about what a 2-month plan actually consists of. Okay, so I'm going to do that in a second. Just before that, I'll say if you're retaking the test, everything I'm about to say still applies to you, especially if you're retaking it and you had some lag of time between when you took it and now. Really, you should aim to do all the same things. But before you do start this study plan, what I want you to do is take a day or two to debrief, to go over what happened last time and try to ask yourself what worked well, what didn't go well, what do I need to focus on this time. Learn from your mistakes, basically. All right, so let's get down to the nitty-gritty. How does a 2-month study plan look like? So 2 months. We're going to talk about 60 days now, and if you're doing a little bit more, a little bit less, then you have to adjust accordingly, but just for convenience's sake, I'm going to talk about a 60-day plan. So the first 47 days of a 60-day plan are about learning the material of the GMAT and practicing it, right? So subject review and practice, okay? And what does this consist of, actually? So, that should be make a list of all GMAT topics. And you're going to want to create a 2-day mini schedule for each topic on the GMAT. So if you make a list of all the topics on the GMAT, and by the way, if you go to examPAL.com, you don't have to make a list because the course is built of a list. That's for your landing page is basically a list taking you through the topics one by one. And what you want to do is build a schedule in which you spend 2 days on each topic. Okay, what do you do during those 2 days? So on the first day, on day 1, you're going to want to review the material. On examPAL, this means watching the intro and the lesson videos, which I mentioned before. The goal is really to understand what this topic is about, right? So if it's triangles, you're going to learn about the rules of the Pythagoras theorem, and you're going to memorize the formulas, and you're really going to finish this day when you have freshened up, because for most of you, this is material that you learned at some point in the past in high school or in college. You freshen up and you know this material again, and you feel comfortable and confident with it. On the second day, on the next day, that's when you're going to practice the question. You're going to solve questions that have to do with this topic. Now, on the first day, I'll just also say, while you're studying, I want you to do 2 things. I want you to keep 2 lists running. One is a summary. Basically, that's your version of an explanation of the material in your own words, in a way that's easy for you to understand. For some people, this will be quite long. You're really going to want to, some people benefit from really writing everything down, and that's the way they remember, and that's great. For other people, it's really just bullet points with like the formulas and really the most general rules. Whatever works for you. But we do find that it helps people when they have their own notes to go back and check, and not only have to go back to, say, the intro video, minute 7, and look for the rule. And the other thing to do is a little bit more practical. It's to write down tips that you pick up on how to actually solve questions with this. So this is what our lessons videos are all about, as I mentioned before. After the intro teaches the fundamentals, the lessons talk about how to solve questions from this topic. And we're going to give you a lot of tips. So I recommend writing down the one that seem that strike your fancy, that seem that they apply to you. And aside from that, you should be thinking yourself all the time, what are your practical tips? While you're learning, if you have suddenly a way that you makes it easier for you to memorize it, write that down. On the next day, you're going to be solving the questions, which on examPAL means just going ahead and doing the practice phase. Okay? Now, while you're doing that, you want to take time to go over your mistakes. And this is kind of an important point, so I'm going to stress this for 1 minute. A lot of us, all of us, I would say, hate making mistakes, myself included. And a lot of us tend, because of that, to kind of gloss over our mistakes. To move on quickly, to not want to really stay with that bad feeling of making a mistake, but to move on and have the more uplifting feeling of getting the next question right. Now, not to take away from the motivation that mistakes can give you to get the next question right, that's great, but it is important to pause and, yes, wallow a little bit in our mistakes. Why? Because, obviously, mistakes are what we want to avoid, and thus we can gain a lot from learning from them. So what do I mean by that? I want you to ask yourself, after pretty much every mistake you make, why did I make this mistake? What type of mistake was it? And I'll explain what I mean by that. There are kind of 3 general categories of mistakes that I think you want to be looking at. One is, did this mistake have to do with not knowing the material well enough, right? Say it was a question about triangles, and I forgot that an adjacent angle to the triangle from the outside of it also sums up to 180 with the angle it's adjacent to. I just didn't remember the rule. So if that's the case, the remedy is pretty simple. Learn the specific rule that you weren't sure about. Go back, watch the intro video, and make sure to add it to your summary, this thing that you've now learned. Okay? But a second category of mistakes is very different. And these are mistakes that have to do with, these are what I call the silly mistakes. These are the mistakes, you look at them and you kind of say to yourself, oh, I'm an idiot. But that doesn't count though. I goofed up, but I really know this, and I'm going to get it right next time. So there's no point in really pausing to look at this too much. And those are actually that's not the response that I want you to have, even though it's very natural, because these silly mistakes are the ones that are often the easiest to prevent. So whenever we make a silly mistake more than once, if we're doing the same mistake twice, then that means there's a pattern, there's something we can prevent. And we need to take time to really look at it and ask ourselves, what is the practical thing, the habit, say I can inculcate in myself to not make myself do this mistake again. And it can be something really simple, like I knew the answer. I knew the answer was D, but I marked C. I don't know why I marked C. I had a brain freeze. So if you do that more than once, then then instead of just resolving not to do it again, which is easier said than done, it can be solved by something simple like just writing down the options A to E on your piece of paper and eliminating them one by one while you solve. And that can eliminate the problem. And there are lots and lots of other examples like this. So take the time to really think of how you can prevent them. And a third type of mistake will be a mistake that has to do with not using the right answer strategy, right? Remember, precise, alternative, and logical? Or I'll even add to that, it might not even be a mistake. You might get a question right, but it took you 2.5 minutes, and we want to be faster than 2 minutes on the GMAT. And you realize that, well, actually, I solved this by doing precise calculations, but if I would have just plugged in a number, I could have solved it in a minute less. And again, the point is to learn from these mistakes and not only know how to solve the question you got wrong, but get a conclusion about what you're going to do next time with a similar type of question. So a conclusion that's applicable for the rest of the test. And while you're doing this, then this leads very naturally into your tips list, which you started the day before, which you're going to update, right? You're going to add to this all tips you have about what helps you solve questions, what helps you, what helps you do it. So this is your 2-day schedule that your 47 days are built on, and you're going to want to divide your time in these 47 days between the 21 topics I think we have divided the GMAT into on examPAL. So you're going to hit a topic every 2 days, and you're going to do something else which I didn't mention up till now, which is on every day you're going to spend time working on your verbal skills. And again, this is both for you non-native English speakers and you native English speakers. This applies to everyone. Although I guess it is more important perhaps for those of us that whose English skills are not as strong. But we recommend spending about an hour to an hour and a half a day working on your English skills, whether it's by reading newspapers or magazines or going over our vocabulary lists, which we have in our vocabulary and memorization section on examPAL. And we recommend doing it in the morning or in the evening, so not to break up your studying during the day. 21 topics equals verbals plus quant. Yes. I might be one or more less than that. But yes, in general, verbal doesn't have that many topics. Verbal has right sentence correction, reading comprehension, and critical reasoning. But quant has lots and lots of subtopics. That's why studying for quant is quite challenging, because there's just a lot of material to go around. While you're doing this, take a day off a week. It's actually important and will help you to do so. You're going to need it. So don't kill yourself. Don't study 7 days a week. And these are the first 47 days. Once you're done with these 47 days, leave 3 days on your calendar that are unscheduled. Not because you're going to necessarily go on a vacation during these days, though I guess that is possible, but more because you never know what's going to come up, right? You're scheduling 47 days, but something is going to come up from your work, or it's gonna cut into a few study days, so you can kick them back here. Or alternatively, you're just going to find you really want to go over a certain topic because you really feel like you didn't understand well enough how to solve data sufficiency questions that have to do with interest, say. So it's good to have a few days off. Right. Then there are the last 10 days before the test, days 50 to 60. And these days are a new phase in our studies, and they're already much more geared towards the actual test. So what do we do during these days? We do two things. One is we review. So on every other day, say every even day, we review. We go over, every day we're going to go over 2 or 3 of the topics that we've been studying for the last 47 days. What do I mean by going over? So we're going to go over our summary that we've written for ourselves. We're going to go over topics that we've flagged for ourselves as problematic, right? So anything that we've seen that we're maybe not sure about. So during the 47 days before, we might not have wanted to get bogged down and moved on, but we marked ourselves, return to this topic. So we will return to that topic. We're going to go over our list, our tips list, that is, of tips that have to do with the specific topic. And of course, our mistakes list about these topics. So you won't have time during these review days to go over, all the videos again, but you shouldn't have to. This is more about a high-level review of the main points that you've learned about each topic. But if you do 2 or 3 topics a day, every other day, that's enough to go over all of the topics in the GMAT. Now, every other day that you're not reviewing, so every odd day, say you're going to be taking a practice test. And for these, we recommend taking the official GMAT prep practice tests, because these are the only official tests that are out there that have actual GMAT questions. And you're going to take it start to finish. If you can, do it at the same time of day as the actual test you're going to take. And spend the rest of the day after you're taking it analyzing it. Okay, so go over the test, check what went right, but more than that, spend time on what went wrong, and you then use the rest of the day to solve questions that are similar to the ones that you got wrong. So in the topics that you got wrong, or the same, if it was data sufficiency, work on data sufficiency questions, the same type of questions. So this is really how you should spend your last 10 days, or really I should say your last 8 days, because the day before the test, we recommend taking off. You have not only earned it, but it will be helpful for you to really take a day and breathe. And the next day, you'll ace the test. Okay, so that's the study plan. And let's return for a second to John that we talked about before I latched into this, to see really what his schedule looks like on a random week during the first 47 days of the test. So if you just look at his schedule here, you'll see that he studies about 3 hours a day on weekdays. Okay. Half of which he devotes to verbal study and half of which to studying the topics. And he studies about a full day on a weekend, okay, so about 8 hours. But he also has time for both his job and other pursuits. He goes to the gym 3 times a day. He has a social engagement 1 night a week, and he even takes an entire day off, which, as we said, you should. So the point being that this is a study plan that can work for someone who's relatively busy but still can spend most of his evenings and a good portion of his weekend studying. So if your schedule can look anything like this, then this is why this study plan might work for you. Okay. So as I mentioned before, if you are retaking the test, then do everything I just said, but do it better. That is, don't cut corners and just work on one topic, but really we recommend going through the whole study plan. But before that, you're going to want to really learn, debrief, see what went wrong the first time around. We talked a little bit about the different kind of mistakes you can have, and then go ahead and proceed and take the test. So all that is good and well, but now let's talk about people that don't have 2 months to give. What if you, for whatever reason, want to take the GMAT in 30 days from now, or close to 30 days from now? So doing so is hard, but it is possible. Even if you have a job and you can't devote every single hour of the day to studying. Okay? Let's say, for example, that you're someone that's busier than John, who we talked about before, but rather you're someone who needs to study for the GMAT in a month. You do have a full-time job, but you're prepared to really devote all your evenings and all of your weekends entirely to the GMAT. So you don't have lots of other engagements and constraints that you need to do. Okay? So say even more specifically, you can study about 3 hours on weekdays and 14 hours over the weekend, over both days of the weekend. So if you're prepared to work hard, you can do this in 1 month. It's not going to be easy, but it is possible. There are a lot of cons that are pretty obvious, a lot of downsides to this situation. There's a lot of pressure, and you're not really going to be able to find a good work-study balance. You're probably not going to be too much fun over the next couple of weeks. But on the other hand, there are even a few advantages. Not that you want to be in this situation, but if you are, there are a few pros. You're not going to have time to forget anything. As I mentioned before, I think people that study for a long time at the end might have a hard time recalling what was in the beginning. It's not going to be the situation here. And plus, on examPAL, at least, we automatically feed you questions that incorporate material you've already done before. So coordinate geometry questions repeat the principles of triangles, quadrilaterals, circles, and polygons. The point being that you're constantly revising even as you're learning new material. Okay? So, if this is what you are planning to do, kiss your friends goodbye for a few weeks, and let's talk about what a 30-day study plan consists of. Just a second. Havantikar asks if the recording will be provided. It will, as I mentioned before. And Gauhar asks, read means reading study materials or journals and books for RC in the study you presented. Yes, reading means reading. Yes, it means reading all of these things, journals and books. We recommend reading high quality magazines like The Economist or The Atlantic or something like that. Even better to read something in a topic that interests you. So, about sports or something that you're interested in. And also, that's part of the day, and also going over vocabulary lists that we have on the site to help you work on your vocabulary. Okay, so what does a 1 month plan look like? So here's the high level summary of what a 1 month plan looks like. So daily study. Yeah, I'm going to study every day, 6 days a week, not 7 days. You still want to take 1 day off a week. And what we did before in the first 47 days, we're going to do now in the first 20 days. The first 20 days are going to be devoted to subject review and practice. What that means in practice is before we had a 2-day schedule for each topic, and now we're going to have a 1-day schedule for each topic. That's really the difference. So what does a 1-day schedule for each topic look like? Well, it looks a lot like a 2-day schedule that consists of all the same things, but it's all smushed into 1 day. So the review of the material, right, the intro and the lesson videos, that's going to be in the morning. And then, so do all the things that we mentioned before, write a summary, write a practical tips list, break for lunch, and in the afternoon, practice, solve subject-related questions. And while you're doing that, again, the same thing as we mentioned before. You're going to want to have a running list of your mistakes. You're going to want to update your practical tips list from before. And then have dinner. And in the evening, work on your reading and memorization. Or in the morning. Or in both of them if you want to break it up in half-hour or 45-minute sessions. But this is really generally what a day looks like during the first 20 days of the study plan. And then the last 10 days or 8 days really are, again, they're very similar to the days we had before. On odd days, you're going to be reviewing, and on even days, you're going to be taking practice tests. At the same time, as you're going to be taking the GMAT if possible, analyze them the rest of the day. So the last 10 days are rather similar to what we've had before, although the review days will probably be more challenging here because you've had less time to study before, so your need to review might be stronger. But that really only since you're not going to have time in review days to go over all the material from start to finish, like watch all the videos. What this underlines is the importance of, in your first 20 days, really making detailed summaries and detailed practical tips lists and mistakes for you to go over in your review days. So the more that you not only study hard, but really prepare yourself, your own study material later on during the review days, you're going to be able to be more efficiently go over the material. Finally, the day before the test, once again, take it off. You want to maybe reconnect with a few friends you've been ignoring for the past month and relaxing, but do me a favor and do go to sleep early before the test. And obviously on the last day, you're going to do what you've been preparing for. So that's what a 30-day study plan looks like. And just for an example of what it looks like in practice, so here's a week in the life of a person who's doing a 30-day plan. So what you can see here is there's really none of the other engagements that we saw before with John Doe's study plan. This is the plan of someone who goes over his vocabulary in the morning, goes to work 9 to 5, comes home, and studies for 3 hours in the evening each day, a different topic, both going over the videos of the review and having time to practice the material, and then reading a little bit before he goes to sleep. And that's it. That's his week. He still has time for a day off, which is important. But then the next day of the weekend, he really spends the whole day working. Like, we're talking about a 13-hour work day. So really challenging weekends. And again, this isn't easy. I'm not sure it's that fun either, but it is possible, even if you're working. And this is what your week should look like. If you're looking at this and you're saying, "There's no way I can do this," then probably the 30-day study plan isn't for you. And once again, we recommend going for the 2-month plan. Are we clear so far? Do you guys have any questions before I delve into the 90-day study plan? If you do, go ahead and ask me. Okay, thank you, Gauhar. So now let's talk about the other extreme. Say you have very little time in your day-to-day, but on the other hand, you have a lot of time till you need to take the test. You can postpone it. You don't have to take it that soon. So if that's the case, it might make sense for you to build a 3-month study plan. Say if you're someone like Tammy Doe. So Tammy is a first-time test taker, but she's really, really busy. Okay, she has to work all the time. And really, she can only set aside, say, 2 hours of studying in the evening and only 3 times a week because she has engagements other nights of the week and she's not interested in canceling them. And plus, she can't take off any work, say, before the test, although she can study significantly more on the weekends. However, she has some constraints, okay? Say a month in, she has a family vacation. A month after that, she has to take a week off. Of course, she has to prepare a presentation at work. And also she has her English skills aren't great, so she has to work a lot on her verbal skills. Once again, this is just obviously general. Your life doesn't have to be like Tammy's, but if anything of what I'm describing sounds like you, that is, you have a little bit of time, but your day-to-day schedule is quite busy, maybe the 90-day plan might work for you. So how does the 90-day plan work? Well, the first phase of practice, of review of the material and practice of the material, which in the first study plan was 47 days, and the second study plan was 20 days. So here we have, excuse me, a full 77 days to spread it out across. Okay, and how does that look? So the mini schedule for each topic, which in the 60-day study plan was 2 days, and in the 30-day study plan was 1 day per topic. So here it's 3 days per topic. I know this says 1 day, but it should say 3 days. So how do you do that? So simple. The first day you study the material, so say you watch the intro and the lesson on the material. Again, remember, when I say day, but really we're only talking about a few hours per day. So the first evening, you say watch these videos. The second day in the evening, you go through the practice phase on examPAL of the material, and the third day you review. That's the day where which you devote to going over the mistakes you had the day before in the practice, compiling mistakes list, and going over stuff that in the first day of studying fundamental material you found to be perhaps confusing. So this is really what your first 77 days look like. Again, excuse me, sorry, you might want to keep a few days unscheduled. So days 78, 90, and 80, you might want to keep them unscheduled for the same reasons we mentioned earlier, just in case you want to push things back. And then your last 10 days should be devoted, as before, to reviewing on every odd day, and every other day aside from that, taking practice tests. With all of the comments I had before about what reviewing means and what taking practice tests means, I'm not going to delve into that too long now because if you've been listening, you already know what I mean. Okay, and then after that, again, take a day off because you've earned it. And finally, D-Day, day of the test, do what you've been studying for. So these are the 3 general study plans, and I have some more tips for you that I want to go over that are relevant to all study plans. Before I do that, let's take a look for a second at Tom Jones's question. Tom Jones asks, what's your experience been with people improving from one practice test to another when taking multiple practice tests within just a few days of one another shortly before an official test? How much improvement do you typically see? I'm not sure I fully understand the question. If you mean that that's all they do, they just take practice tests and they don't do any other review, then, well, I have a few comments. First of all, you can retake a GMAT test 16 days at minimum after taking a previous test. So say you've studied a lot, you take the test, you're not happy, but you feel like you are ready, so you can schedule within a little less than 3 weeks. 2.5 weeks, and then you can study. So really, I think I started answering. You're asking specifically about the study plan presented here, a 60-day plan with a practice test taken every 2 or 3 weeks. Oh, okay, now I follow. You're asking about spreading the practice tests out and not doing them in the last 10 days. So that's a good question. Generally, I don't. So if this is your first time taking the test, we don't recommend doing that. Why? Because there's no point in taking practice tests early on. All it's going to show you is that you're not ready, but you really aren't ready. You already knew that. That's why you're in the middle of your studies. There's really no point. A lot of people sometimes treat practice tests as like just to know where I'm standing, but that's really not the main reason to take practice tests. The main reason to take practice tests is to hone your skills and learn from them. And plus, where you're standing, if you're in the middle of your studies, that's not going to tell you that much. Now, if you're asking specifically about someone who's retaking the test and redoing a study plan while retaking the test, then it might make sense. Then it might make more sense. Because you've already studied the material and you do want, there it might make a little more sense to see where you're standing, as it were. And really just the main reason is you have studied all the information. So that is possible. However, it is a finite resource, at least the high-quality practice tests, those GMAT prep practice tests. They only give 2 out for free. In the GMAT, in our examPAL course, you get another 2, and you can buy yet another 2. But even that altogether, that's only 6 of these official tests. And, it's worth saving them for the last 10 days for this reason. There are other practice tests out there that aren't official. They're not as good, but some of them are passable. So yeah, if you have the time, you can take some of those. 114 asks, how do you know you're effectively studying rather than staying stagnant? That's a really good question. Well, I'm going to talk about that. I think I'll address that a little bit more in the tips I'm about to give, but in general, that's actually a really good question. And Part of it is, look, on examPAL, we sort of half solve the problem for you. You don't have to think about it too much because that's what examPAL is all about. We're telling you as you're studying, look, maybe you're not using this tool enough. Maybe you want to use this tool. And in fact, some of the time we're not telling you, but we're just actively working on improving your skills and giving you material that's going to be relevant for you. That being said, the main way to know you're effectively studying is to see how well you improve in just general practice, how many questions you're getting right and how long it takes you, and obviously during the practice tests, see how well you're doing. Renato asks, applying a 30-day plan during 90 days is recommendable. I'm not sure what you mean by that. What do you mean applying a 30-day plan during 90 days? Okay, actually, let's do this, guys. I'm really happy to answer your questions, but I'm going to forge ahead and give everybody here some more tips we have, and then in the end, I'll stick around and I'll answer whatever questions you have. So go ahead and ask them, but I'm going to answer them in a few minutes. So we've just gone through 3 study plans, 3 months, 1 month, 2 months. And here are some more tips of things to remember while you're studying. So one of them is it's really important to focus when you study, okay? And how do you do that? How do you focus when you study? Well, I think it is very recommended to have your cell phone nowhere near you when you're studying, and I speak from experience here. Have it on mute, under the pillow, in a different room. On your computer, if you're studying with examPAL, you're going to be studying on your computer, which can also be kind of tempting to do other things. So have everything closed. The only browser that should be open should be on examPAL on your studies. And when you're not doing stuff, when you're reading or whatever, so don't be on airplane mode and don't have internet. That's one thing. Another thing is, if you're having trouble grasping any topic throughout your studies, so, well, there are a few different things you can do. If it's something that's not very big, if it's kind of, a sub-topic, then don't get bogged down. Don't throw off all your studies just for that, but rather push it later. That's why you have these review days that we talked about, okay? If it's something that's more fundamental, if you're like, I just am not understanding the point of decimals, for example, then do devote time to it. And it is permissible to devote more time to this topic and steal from other topics and make your next topic only do 1 day instead of 2 days, say if you're in the 60-day plan. I will stress, however, never steal all of the time. That is, don't skip entire topics. Even if you feel like you're good at them, don't skip entire topics. Spend at least a little bit of time going over them. Another point, and this is probably one that I've already gone over a lot today, remember that mistakes are opportunities to learn. Take time to really go over your mistakes at all stages of studying, both when in the first 20 days and in the last 10 days when you're going over your tests. That's how we improve, right? I think, so there was this earlier question of how do you know that you're not staying stagnant? I would say this is one of the main ways you know when you're not staying stagnant, when you get a question right that you know you would have gotten wrong a few days ago, or you had gotten wrong a few days ago, something similar, and the reason was that you learned a new tool, a new technical way of going about it. This is what not being stagnant means. It means learning from your mistakes. Get 8 hours of sleep every night, no exceptions. And if you can, we really recommend exercising. It'll both help you and make you a happier person while you're studying. Be optimistic, but also be realistic. I mentioned this at the very beginning, but don't build a study plan that's based on the assumption that you're going to do everything and there are going to be no hitches. When you're building your study plans, right? So you're going to be what it literally means is you're going to be sitting in front of your calendar and scheduling study hours, whichever study plan you're doing. You want to, you're gonna know April 20th. I go to work and then I come back and I study triangles. April 21st, I go to work, I come back, and then I'm gonna study integers, right? Now the point is, you want to take into account all of the non-GMAT things you're gonna have to do during this time. That includes exercise. That includes meeting your friends. That includes stuff you might not want to do, but you're gonna have to do. And it's important to be realistic and not just say to yourself, oh, I'm going to have time. There's not going to be anything that pops up. So that's really the point here. And really, these are the tips. So we're almost done. I want to say thank you to you guys for being with me during this time. And once again, we have a special offer for you guys, 25% off on all of our courses. Just for you. So go ahead and claim that. And I hope this was helpful for you guys. And I'm going to answer a few of your questions now. So Renato asks, if you apply the same intensity of a 30-day plan during 90 days, is that recommendable? No, it is not recommendable. I think if you do that, you will be burnt out. And probably most people won't be able to do it. Like at some point, you'll just get burnt out while you're doing it, and you won't be able to keep it up. And if you do try to keep it up, for most of us normal mortals, it's just it'll be too much, and we don't recommend it. Plus, it's not necessary. It's not necessary. This is one of the main things that we try and stress. It's better to study less, more effectively, than it is to study lots and lots and lots monotonously. So that's why we think 100 to 120 hours or 130 to 150 hours is enough to study. A lot of study plans are a lot longer, but the reason they're longer is because students literally just solve thousands of questions regardless of their level, regardless of what the tools are, just kind of mindlessly going through lots and lots of material. It's not helpful. So yeah, that's why I don't recommend it. 114 asks, I'm graduating. I'll have 2 weeks completely free right before the GMAT. Is it okay to put in 60 hours during that time and try and study when I can now, in total 40 plus hours while I'm finishing on college? So I'm going to and I'm gonna answer a little bit more generally, if that's okay, and then I'll try and be a little bit more specific. So obviously, the tests that I did now, the study plans rather that I talked about now are general templates, right? They're general plans of 30 days, 60 days, and 90 plans. Obviously, for a lot of you people, it's not going to be exactly one of these multiples of 30 days. You might have 45 days, and you might have 75 days, and you might have 20 days that are like this, and then another 15 days that are like this, the same way that you seem to be having 114. So yeah, it is definitely in general possible and even recommendable to kind of combine between the different study plans we used, and find the fit that works for you. So a little bit more specifically about what your question is. You said, I'm looking at it again, 2 weeks completely free before the GMAT, but now you are studying, you're finishing up college. So yeah, it definitely does make sense right now to build a schedule right now in which now you're studying as much as you can, and later on studying more. Make sure that you get to this total of 100 to 120 hours. Make sure that you that you actually budget enough time to do all of the things that I mentioned you should do, hitting all the material, doing the practice tests. If you can do that, then yes, it is possible. Before, someone asked, what is the validity of the course? I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that, but as I mentioned before, we have a success guarantee. That's how sure we are of ourselves. If you've taken the test before, we guarantee a 70-point increase. Go to our test and see the conditions for that and take us up on that. Okay. I'm trying not to miss any of your questions. DRFI Daddy asks, what are the similarities of GRE, GMAT, TOEFL, and IELTS? Look, it's not really the topic of this webinar, so I'm not going to go too much into it because I don't imagine most people are that interested. In general, GRE and GMAT have a lot of similarities, but GRE has a heavier emphasis on English skills, where GMAT has a heavier emphasis on quant. I shouldn't say heavier emphasis. They both have the same amount, relatively, of quant and verbal, but in GRE, the verbal is harder. In GMAT, the quant is harder. TOEFL and IELTS tests are English tests. That's all they are. So they're very different. And if you're interested, we have an article on our blog on examPAL of GRE and GMAT. What are the differences and which ones we recommend going for? Because they can both be used for business school. So just if you want to go search for that examPAL blog, GRE and GMAT differences, we review that. Tom Jones asks, is there a content area in the 60-day plan you find most frequently requires more practice review than the others? That's actually a good question. Not really. Everyone's different. Some people have, people have different problems with different topics. Just off the top of my head, I would say a lot of people find critical reasoning to be hard. A lot of people find fractions and percents to be kind of hard. A lot of people find sets to be a little bit confusing, but really those are just kind of general answers. It's more individualized than that. So I wouldn't know. It does make sense when you're building your study plan to ask yourself in the beginning, what are my strengths and weaknesses, just in general, because you might have an intuition to I really want to go over the geometry topics kind of more, and I feel more confident with the arithmetic ones. And then you can do that. You can schedule a little bit more time for those if you feel that that's your situation. Priyam asks, will you be sharing this PowerPoint? Yes, we will. You guys will get an email with not only the PowerPoint, but the recording of me speaking. You can listen to at your pleasure. Okay, Faisal asks, GMAT exam in 10 days. You have all the time in the world. What would I recommend for a study plan? So obviously 10 days isn't enough for any of the study plans that I just mentioned. And I don't know from what your message, what your situation is, as in if you know the material yet or not. If you already know the material, even to some degree, then I guess I would recommend doing something that's similar to the last 10 days of all of our study plans. That is, every other day take a practice test, review it, and every other day, aside from that, just spend some time reviewing material. If you haven't touched any of the material yet, then then actually still do that, but just reviewing material here will be something much more rudimentary. Just really going over the material at a high level. It's not enough time to really study all the material, but that is what I would recommend doing in 10 days. Hope that was helpful. The course will remain valid for how many days or months? That's a good question. A long time. Maybe Karine will be able to help me with answering that because I'm not sure I remember. I think it's 6 months that our course is valid for if you get it. But you don't have to take my word for it. If you go to our pricing page, we mention that. I'm not 100% sure. 111 asks, you can get the recording. Yes, you can get the recording. Faisal, you're saying you are doing a retake. Okay, good. So if you're doing a retake, yes, I recommend doing something that's similar to the last 10 days of our study plan, right? You don't have to study the material again because you've already done so, but you can spend your time doing practice tests and doing a review of the material. Just what I would add is spend a day at the beginning, like spend the next day to tomorrow, for example, doing like a debrief of what happened. So I recommend getting an ESR, an enhanced score report, seeing how your previous test was, what went right and what didn't go right, and trying to improve from that. And then you can focus the review in the next 10 days. Maybe you don't have to review all of the material, but you'll be able to spend more time on the topics that require work. So that might be helpful to you. Okay, I think I managed to hit your guys' questions. I hope this was helpful for you guys. I hope it was as pleasant for you as it was for me. You guys have been a very interactive audience, which I like. So thank you very much for keeping me company in the chat here and asking pertinent questions. Gauhar, thank you. And I hope to see you guys at examPAL.com. If you do come to our course, even if you just go right now and without even for signing up, you can always send us questions. There's a chat bubble. Good chance I'll answer or another one of our excellent tutors. So I hope to see you there. And good luck, whichever study plan you use, good luck with acing the GMAT. And see you guys on our next webinar. Bye. Have a good one.